a character designer and visual development artist in the animation industry. I've worked for DreamWorks, Netflix, Warner Brothers. I've also designed for Supercell, their mobile game company. And I also do toy design and run my own company as well. I'm currently working at Reddit as a creative manager, working on some behind the scenes stuff. I'm gonna go over my journey in where I started and then how I got to where I am presently. So I hope you guys enjoy. We'll also have time for questions at the end. So let's get started. My very first tablet was a Graphier, Wacom Graphier. I got this in middle school after begging my parents for something to draw on the computer with. And I drew on this all the way through high school. This is my beginning art. I haven't shown a lot of people this, but I wanted to give a good grounds of like where I was, where I started, right? And then how it changed. So this was stuff that I drew for fun on like DeviantArt. I was like maybe middle school, like 11 to 12 to 13. And I was drawing all these things for fun. I don't even think I had Photoshop. I was just doing this in like paint. There's no like brush weight or whatever. And then over the years, slowly it got better. And when I was in, I think, middle school, what was really popular was okekake boards, which is basically where you're drawing with people, right? It's like where you just have one line weight as well. And that was what I did because I went to school internationally. So I was raised in Atlanta, Georgia. And then in 6th grade, I moved to Shanghai, China. And I went to an international school for 7 years. So middle school and high school. And during that time, there just weren't that many artists that I knew, right? Like we had some people who liked to paint, but nobody really liked anime, or if they did, they didn't really say it, right? And most people didn't draw it, right? I went to a very, very like high-end private international school, so everyone was focused on math, grades, like getting into APs and like, colleges, college learning in like middle school. So for me, I felt very, very much like the odd one out, right? Like no one else really did what I did. So for me, the release was online communities, like finding people online who were part of like fandoms or just wanted to draw. Like it didn't matter if you were good or not. It was more about the community building, right? And that honestly helped so much and just kind of expanded my love for animation. And of course, living overseas, the only movies that, got brought overseas were like Disney animated movies or Pixar movies or like DreamWorks movies. So I got super attached to them because they reminded me of home, right? And around, I think, 7th or 8th grade, it finally clicked. Like, I think I want to be an artist, but I don't want to be a fine arts artist. I want to be like a digital artist. But at that time, I had no means of understanding like how the creative process worked. I had no idea what character designer even was, right? All I knew is I wanted to go in this direction. And I talked to my parents about it. And my parents are very Asian, so they're both engineers. Everyone in my family, extended family, is all engineers. So for them to hear me, running to them being like, I want to be an artist, they were very like, oh, okay. Will you be able to eat? Right? So their agreement and their kind of trial run with me was, okay, if you want to be an artist, we know you like anime, but let's learn some foundational skills, right? That was the agreement. If you want to do art, digital art, let's also make sure your basics are really strong, right? So after school, I would go to like a super dingy Chinese art academy, no AC. It's like concrete walls, the teacher's in like the backyard smoking with a potted plant, and then all the students are like huddled around like still life. Like it's freezing cold and you're just drawing and drawing and drawing. This is a very like, I don't know, typical Asian experience, I think, in China at an art academy. It's a little nicer in the US. But this is what I ended up learning and doing in, I think this was by that time, it was high school, right? Like I still drew anime on the side. I was not going to draw still life in my free time, but I still learned the foundations, right? I didn't understand at first, but then slowly I grew to understand like, oh, okay, like it's not really about drawing realistically. It's actually about seeing better, understanding better, being able to have techniques that help you visualize and explain your thoughts better, right? That's why you learn, like when you are learning reading and everything, you're learning about how people write, how there's different ways of writing, expressing yourself, right? Same thing. That's what foundation does. It sets the ground for you to be able to express yourself freely without limitations, right? I would have probably been fine if I had just stuck with anime drawing, but because I have this foundation, that actually allows me to adapt even more. My eye is now a little bit more trained, and that only helps, right? So, after all this traditional drawing, my parents finally, like, I grew out of my graphite. I think I actually broke it because it was very small, right? And I was very aggressive with drawing on it. So one Christmas, I always got these for Christmas because this was the only thing I would ask for Christmas. And I got an Intuos Pro 4, I think, at that time. This was what it was. All wired, not wireless. And this is what I drew on from high school to college, all the way through college, actually. I refused to use a Cintiq because I just loved tablets. And you can tell from that difference of learning foundational art, my lines got better, my color got better. This was still in the beginning of, I think near the end of high school. This is where the skill level went. And then this is, I think, beginning of college, right? I went to Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah and Atlanta campus. I majored in animation, which was actually like full on, like I'm animating, 2D animating, and I learned 3D animating as well. And when I applied to Savannah College of Art and Design, I still had no idea that character designer was a position. I had no idea visual development was a position. I think also because at that time, it wasn't very well known. Like there weren't that many positions like that. It's only in the past like 10 years that it's really started to become that title and developed that way, right? And this was one of the first, I think, drawings that I did where I finally, it kind of clicked in college, like, oh, I think this is kind of like where I like to go. I love cute, I love charming, I love like this warmth type of feel, right? And for me at that time, my backgrounds still weren't very good. So I decided if I can't do backgrounds, I'm gonna take photographs of backgrounds and draw on top of it, right? Because that way it still works and it still looks really good. So this is actually in my dorm room. I just like set things up, took photos, I think with my phone, and then I just drew over it. And this was actually one of my assignments that I ended up animating. Yeah, and then, so I graduated Savannah College of Art and Design in 2015. I graduated with a aspiration to work in animation, either as a 2D animator or something in 3D, right? Lo and behold, I started working in Atlanta at Primal Screen as an illustrator for the first 2 years after graduating. And that was kind of my first peek into, oh my goodness, you can actually be a character designer. You can actually just like design what gets animated rather than just animating. I actually got hired at Primal Screen to be an animator, okay? And within the first week of working there, I went, I think I hate animating. I think I hate animating for work. Oh no, what have I done? I just spent the last 4 years concentrating on animating, and now I don't think I like it because it's different when you have to do it for a job. And I immediately went to the hiring director and I went, is there room for me to maybe just be a designer? At Primal Screen, it was just called an illustrator, someone who designed the characters and the backgrounds. And thankfully, there was space. So they switched me over immediately, and I thrived there for 2 years, you know, learning. But the problem with being in Atlanta for me was that that's not really where things start. That's more of where things go after they've already been created. And for me, there was a little bit of that itch to like, I want to be at the beginning. I want to create things. I want to create the style. I want to design things because I design thinking of the whole world. I don't design just one character. When I think about this character and where it's going to live, how it's going to interact. That all brings into my character designs, right? So I decided, like, I woke up in the middle of the night and I went, I need to move to LA or else I'm going to regret it because I need to just try. I need to just try and shoot my shot and like see if I can do it. You know, if I don't, you know, I move there and I don't make it, that's totally fine. But at least I don't have regrets, right? I operate kind of on it's a little bit risky, but I operate on like having no regrets if I can. And so I gave them not a 2 weeks notice, but a 2 months notice that I'm gonna leave to LA, peace out, thank you so much for like having me and like nurturing me into a professional, but now I have to leave. And because of that, they were super welcoming and everything. When I got to LA though, because I had only been focusing on, you know, animation, like the college portfolio was just animation really. And so I had to figure out and reinvent like, okay, what is the character design position? What is actually required, right? I had some stuff from when I was in college and when I worked that I put together. But for the first 6 months, I could not get a job. I could not get anyone to like call me back. I couldn't get anyone to like bite any of like my applications, right? And I don't think that it was my technique, but I think it was because I wasn't truly showing who I was in my portfolio. I was showing what I thought they wanted, which was a direct copy of like Disney artists, a direct copy of like what I had seen in the art of books, right? But the problem with that is these artists already exist. They're not going to, like they understand and it's probably like still good to show it, but that's not really gonna make you stick out, right? Out of all the artists that are trying to do that style, maybe they only choose one. That's really, really, really good, right? But so everyone else who's also trying that style won't get like callbacks, won't get like those job opportunities. So I had to think long and hard, and I just kind of went, you know what? Forget it. I'm gonna do what I want to do, because throughout the whole thing, I realized that there are experiences inside of me that nobody else has. All of us have this, right? This is what makes us unique. This is what makes our voice our voice. And I thought, okay, when I lived in China, I visited Mongolia 3 times. I lived there for a couple weeks. So I don't think anyone else really has like direct like living in Mongolia in the yurts kind of experience, right? So I drew from that and I thought, okay, let me just make a portfolio based on my experiences and based on what I know and what I had seen, right? And I just kind of threw away like copying the Disney style or copying portfolios that I had seen. The general layout was similar, but everything else was just more of, this looks fun to me, I think I'm gonna do this, right? It's, again, there is no like grand plan of like, if I do this, then they're definitely gonna like contact me. It was more of, nothing's working, I'm gonna do what I like, because that's the best that I can do right now, right? And so I put together this portfolio, Pebbles and Breadcrumbs. It's based off of Hansel and Gretel, and it's just focused on Mongolian culture, the Duka people. These are reindeer herders. These are native tribes that work really, really closely with animals. I think a section of them hunt even with wild wolves and hawks, right? But they're mostly known as the reindeer herders. And I have a huge interest in animals. So I just researched. I thought it was really cool. It actually started to click like, oh, I really enjoy just like learning about how people live and how they treat their animals and like that cool like human versus like animal relationship, right? And so I did that portfolio off of this. This isn't the whole portfolio, but this is just stuff that I put together. And I think the biggest difference in this was the heart behind these drawings. Recruiters could tell that I actually enjoyed what I was drawing, and that actually made a huge difference. After I made this portfolio, I started getting recruiters contacting me. I started getting people asking me about jobs and stuff. I actually got my first job, freelance gig at Netflix as a character designer because they saw this portfolio. And they're like, we have a show, the character's not designed yet, please, feel free. That type of designing is called blue sky designing, where there's nothing planned yet and you're just allowed to play. I love that. I love that kind of design. It's not common that it happens, but when it happens, ooh, it's the best job, right? So it slowly snowballed from there into a full-time position at DreamWorks. I worked at DreamWorks for close to 3 years, working on the latest show that came out is actually Gabby's Dollhouse. I worked on a lot of the characters, and then when that show was done, I worked in development for DreamWorks. So I was working in pre-development at DreamWorks. So I was working on pitches that need like styles and character designs. It was loads of fun. And it was only when I started working in studio that I finally switched to a Cintiq. I refused to switch to a Cintiq this entire time because, you know, I'm pretty petite, so like having the hand on the screen as I'm drawing, I would always be like, wait, I can't see my lines, like this isn't making sense to me, right? Because I'm so used to having the screen really, really clear. And all this to say, like, you don't need the most expensive tool when you're starting out. You just need something and you just need to start, right? And so on the Cintiq, after working at DreamWorks and like Warner Brothers, and I actually designed for Supercell for a year on their newest mobile game that's in beta testing, you know, while all of this was happening and like my career was thriving, there was still a part of me though that wanted to have my own thing. Because again, like I've said before, like I love world building. I love like the like storytelling. I love just like the idea of like building a world, sharing it with people. That's really what drives me. So while I'm satisfied in the work aspect, for my personal work, there was a little bit of a gap. So afterwards, after work, I started focusing on like, okay, what is it that's missing from my heart? What is it that I really want to do? Because for me, I actually don't try to put like emotional satisfaction on my job. I feel like that can actually be a little bit hard for an artist because things don't always go your way when you're working. You're working with a team, and so you don't always have control, and you shouldn't hold on to that control, right? It's a team. Animation is teamwork. If you try to be a lone wolf, it doesn't really work well, and it stresses you out more because you can't control all of that. So instead, for me, where I find my emotional satisfaction is in my personal work. And Dear Cat and Snoo was born. So this was based off of my love for like, I loved reading as a kid. I loved animal stories like Redwall, Warriors, right? And I also loved Peter Rabbit, Beatrix Potter, Jemima Puddle Duck. Very, very classic. I haven't seen anything like that. And she's been deceased for a while, and there still hasn't been anything that's really surpassed that kind of charm and love. And that's kind of because she didn't set out to be a world-renowned artist. She just set out to draw what she wanted and to be entertaining to the kids that she knew, right? And so Dear Cat and Snoo was born from that. My own love of like, what is it that I really like? I love Studio Ghibli. I love like Dirakuma, which is like a bear mascot in Japan. And at that time, I think the only thing in the US is like Pusheen, which I love, but like there's so much more that people haven't experienced, right? So I thought, if it isn't in the US, I'm gonna bring it to the US. I'm gonna share this because there is so much fun there, right? And it's only by sharing that we can start to develop these styles for mainstream, right? And also, like, anime lovers, we're mainstream now, right? It's no longer like kind of hidden. We're on Netflix, we're on Funimation, right? So I started getting like really, really into like these characters. It's deer cat, and Snoo is an elephant shrew, and then I have a tiger called multi-tiger. And it slowly turned into like what people recognized me as. This was just stuff that I was putting on my Instagram. And remember how I said like my portfolio shared my heart, and so recruiters resonated to it? I was not expecting recruiters and like just everyone to start resonating to Dear Cat. The whole reason that I actually got my Supercell job is because the art director that I worked under saw Dear Cat and loved Dear Cat. He just saw it and he was like, I haven't seen this kind of work in animation, right? And it just snowballed from there. It rolled into tons of like, pre-development. It rolled into the Supercell work and the toy design work for Gund and Spin Master. Gund makes Pusheen. So kind of went full circle. And this actually was for ArtStation Learning, also sponsored by Procreate. So, it's a whole like course you can actually watch on ArtStation Learning where I go through my start to finish of like sketching, like line art, and then rendering. But it's basically snowballed and it's turned into like plush toys. This is the plush toy that my art director at Supercell saw and was like, oh my God, this is so cool. When I was working at DreamWorks in animation, because I had experience in animation in 3D and 2D, a lot of the stuff that I was working on was stuff that they had never done before, like 3D models with 2D illustrated faces, or a combination of 2D and 3D, right? Which I love, because to me, 2D and 3D is just a medium to get your story out. So that's also why, for me, with my own brand and Dear Cat, I don't think too much about like, oh, it's 2D, how do I make that into a 3D plush? How do I make that into a merchandise? Because people love Dear Cat and now also want to like decorate their rooms or have Dear Cat with them, right? And so to me, it's not that hard of a switch, right? Because I'm already designing for 3D in animation. The same skills there works for plush toys and works for vinyl toys. These are like the designer vinyl toys. They released actually during COVID, and I was expecting them not to do so hot, but they've done very well. And they're sold at places like Sideshow, Kid Robot, Plastic Heart. So a lot of big toy manufacturers also stock Dear Cat now. And we have colors like melon and cotton candy sparkle, and there's like, now it's become something where like, my love of just creating and world building has now spanned into where I have, passive income from vinyl toys, and it's sold globally, right? And there's already like, we have a production team and everything that's working on the second series, and also my own online store merchandising. A lot of the people that probably know me on Instagram is because I would go to conventions and stuff to kind of promote my own stuff and just talk with everyone. And also my full-time work, right? So I didn't set out like thinking like, I'm gonna make so much money by doing all these things, right? Like that was never my goal. My goal was, I'm gonna share what I like to do, and I'm just gonna follow the opportunities that happen, right? Because you don't know what opportunities will come, right? So the best you can do is what you can do now. And it's putting a lot of seeds down of like, this is fun, I'm gonna do that, and kind of following your heart. I'm quite childlike when it comes to how I feel or how I like visualize ideas. I very much just, if I resonate with it, I'm gonna work on it. If I would like to buy it, then I'm gonna make it, right? This is how I operate, which is really simple, but it's forgotten a lot of the times when you're racing just for, getting that job, getting that dream job, getting that like income. And to me, this is truly what it's about. This is what makes me happy. And this is what I hope to continue working on in the future. So I am currently, just to give you a little heads up, like I'm currently at Reddit as a creative manager. I lead my own art teams, and we work on a ton of stuff in 2D and 3D. And that came from having my own brand, merchandising, having physical products, like having that knowledge of 3D and 2D. I would not be able to explain to you a proper pathway to get there, because everything that I've done is kind of unorthodox. It's very much just based on my heart and a little bit of risk too, right? It's just no regrets. So I'm going to do my best at what I do. And it's ultimately paid off. And I think that a lot of artists and students would be very, very happy and ecstatic if they knew that they could also do that. There are more and more opportunities for students. If you don't work in animation, go independent, sell on Instagram, right? There's so many friends that I know who only did like conventions, and they're making 6 figures, buying houses. They're huge, right? So there's more than like one pathway to go. It just depends on where you want to go and putting in your effort into there. So thank you guys for listening. If you want to find out more, I'm on social media as Amber Aki Huang. You can always just search that up and it should appear. My website is akiart.org. And if you're just curious, there's no pressure at all, but if you're just curious, the Dear Cat stuff can be found at dearcatshop.com. Thank you guys. Yeah, are there any? Oh, thank you. Yeah, are there any questions? Oh, let's go.
Can you tell us about your middle name, Aki?
Oh, so Aki is actually a nickname that I got from when I was really young. I'm Taiwanese, so a lot of my relatives all speak Japanese and all that. So I think it's just something that naturally happened over time. I think it really stood out around middle school. Like I was going by Aki with really close friends, and it's just basically turned into like at work everyone calls me Aki. Yeah, it's just become like basically my middle name. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you asking like how to polish up a project, or is it to how to like reel in the iterations so that you can continue going forward? Okay, okay. Honestly, it's a little hard when it's not for a specific like, because when you're working at a job, there are certain parameters that you have to follow, right? There's certain deliverables, and so you do a certain amount of iterations, and there's always someone like an art director or an EP, an executive producer, to review it. So they ultimately will tell you kind of what path to go, right? That's kind of on the whole like teamwork and then not a lone wolf. But when it's your own thing, because it's kind of unlimited, it can be hard to settle on something, right? It can be hard to kind of reel it in and be like, okay, this is my final decision. And for me, actually, I think actually having more of a loose mindset on that is better. Like Dear Cat, when I first created Dear Cat, I didn't try to just be like, okay, that's the final design, it's never changing, like that's it, this is what it's going to be, right? Because as you draw the final design more and more, it changes naturally. It just develops naturally. Like Multi-Tigers changed multiple times in styles, and then it got to like where this is, right? And I think that it's part of, as long as you're still enjoying it, right? And also like if you have a story, what is the story? Have you thought of the story? How is the design working for the story? If the iterations look cool, but aren't maybe like expressing the story the right way, then it's more obvious like, okay, let's try something that's really grounded in the story itself, right? But I think for the most part, when you're working on your projects, the most important thing is to have fun, right? If it's to be like portfolios for school or something, have a ton of fun. Just draw what you want, draw. And then at the end, as you're compiling it, right? Like if you have a deadline or something, maybe there's a couple pieces that you think like the posing's really nice, or you just really like that drawing, just finish it up a little bit. Even in portfolios, I don't recommend like only showing finished work. I actually think that showing sketches is really good because it's showing your thinking process. And that's actually the most important. It's not just about, you're not a machine, right? You're not just creating a finished product. You're not just copying whatever needs to be copied. You're actually thinking as you design, and that's the difference between character designers and visual development, because you're world building. It takes a lot of brain power. You're mulling over a lot of things. And so having a lot of sketches is great. Having iterations is great. And being able to just show that on your portfolio, I would actually highly recommend. If you can share like, here's my sketches, and then here's like where I started cleaning it up a little bit, and then here's like maybe one finished color. It's actually more important just to show the process than it is to show the final product. Yeah.
There's a couple of questions from the chat
Yeah.
on Twitch. One, I'm going to lump into two.
Okay.
Or I'll lump two questions into one. What and who have been the biggest influences to your style?
Ooh, that's a very hard one. So I think a better way to answer this is, when I was younger, when I wasn't around a lot of artists, right? I was pretty caught up in like having my own style, like what is my style, right? And like sharing that. And it's not a bad thing. It just naturally happens, right? A lot of times you don't know it. It's subtle. It just happens because you're trying to find your identity as an artist. So naturally it goes to like, what is my style? Like, how do you find your style and everything, right? But to me, my style, I don't really think about it. My style changes all the time, but it's totally fine to me because I think also over the years, building that confidence, like having that confidence in yourself. Like, I think sometimes people are like, oh, I have an anime style, and then I have like a animation style, and then if I work too much in the animation style, I lose the anime style, and I'm trying not to lose either style. But the thing to me is that's kind of like, yeah, if you draw one style and switch to the other one, sure, it might not like come as quickly, but that's where foundations are really important, because now your switching abilities, your eye for like proportions, your eye for detail has switched a little bit. So when you have a good foundation, it becomes a lot easier to switch styles. And so you don't have to hold on to like anime style or your style or someone else's style too strongly. To me, style is all the influences over the years. Like, I can't even choose to, because at this point it might be thousands of influences, right? It just, as you consume media, as you consume entertainment, it all kind of affects the way you end up drawing. Like, my style for work is really different from my style for personal work. But it ultimately just comes down to, what do you like and how do you want to express yourself? And the more influences and the more people that you kind of look at their artwork, the better. I think the only issue with keeping too hard on a style is like, if you just try to copy one person's style, it can be a bit like stifling. Like, like, it's good to copy when you're learning. It's definitely like not a bad thing to copy as long as you don't claim it as your own. But as you're learning, the more and more you learn, styles are just shorthands. They're not like, okay, this is my style and then that's it. It's not black and white. It's always going to change as you change. So I wouldn't hold it too, I wouldn't hold it up on a pedestal. Just enjoy yourself and it will come. Let it come as it will. Just continue enjoying and having fun. Is there another question or?
Well, we've resolved the question of where can everybody buy all you all and the plushies, since those were super adorable. But I think we're caught up with the chat. Everyone says thank you, your answers were amazing. So
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
I have a question too.
Oh,
I'm sorry. At what point did you start looking for employment? Was it after you graduated or during?
it was actually after graduating. So my parents were very like, bless their heart, but they were a little bit confused on how the artistic process works, right? So when I was in college, they really wanted me to find an internship. But the thing with internships is there aren't that many, and I know a lot of people who are really successful without getting an internship at Disney or getting an internship at like DreamWorks, because there's maybe only 5 internship positions, right? And a lot of the times it's easier if you live in the city. It's easier if you're really close by. What actually really helped me when I was in college was going to anime conventions and selling. I would have tables in the artist alley and the booths because that actually built my confidence in speaking. I was actually super, super shy. I could, like, if I was in college first year and you told me, like, go up there and speak, I would be a nervous wreck. I would be stuttering, like I'd be like sweating, I would have no idea how to talk, right? But conventions actually really help because one, you're selling your artwork, so you're also slowly learning about the audience and business and marketing, which is great. Artists really need to know that because you are your own brand. You are longevity wise, social media, right? Like exposure, being able to like market yourself properly, like being able to share like, here, I'm an artist, this is what I do. A lot of times you have to be the one to put yourself out there because people don't know you yet. So you gotta have people, like let people know who you are. So conventions actually helped a lot. And conventions was a great place to meet other artists. A lot of animation people also do conventions. Like I did conventions to actually earn money for like art supplies through college because there wasn't that much money coming in, right? I was on scholarship and everything. And I just didn't want to ask my parents for money for art supplies. So to me, it was a little bit of a pride thing, but also just getting yourself out there. And then, even now, I still do conventions, and it's honestly one of my favorite things. That's the best part where I get to actually interact with my followers or students or like even industry pros. Like if you can, I would highly recommend like Lightbox Expo, any like animation expos in the area. I think in Seattle there's a Emerald City Comic Con that's also really big. Like even if you don't booth, just go and walk around. You could do a family trip and then take one day to just go see it, right? I think it's just really great because it surrounds you with all these like unique ideas and opportunities and like-minded people. So that actually helped more than the internship itself. Awesome. I think that's it then. We're good? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me again.
Okay, awesome. Welcome, you guys. I'm Peter Han, and we are here at the Wacom Experience Center here in Portland, Oregon. Thank you for joining me, also for a small group here in the audience as well, too. Thank you also to Amber, and I'm sure if you guys listening on the talk, you guys hopefully learned a lot about her experience in education and expression towards how it was applied in the industry and where she applies it to. For me, real quickly, I'll just give you a slight breakdown as to what we're going to be doing currently. We have about 40 minutes to kind of go over some things. Of course, I wish I had hours and I could go for hours. However, we'll try to keep it constricted so we have our time zones to take a break during the holidays. Today, we're going to be getting into something more specific, not necessarily about my entire storyline. Most of you, if you do follow me on social media, Instagram, stuff like that, you may already know the kind of things that I do. However, some of you may have seen things like YouTube videos, lectures, live streams. So I kind of still want to touch upon that because there might be some people here right now that don't know about what I've done. So real quickly, as you can see, just a quick photograph on Photoshop. I'll be using Photoshop mainly. I'm using, obviously, the Wacom Cintiq to do a lot of the drawing digitally as well, too. I'll give you a bit of the setup in terms of materials if you guys want to plan to do something like this in the future. I'm sure you can rewatch this again if you are subscribed towards the Wacom Experience Center on Twitch. At the moment, we're going to be going to more technique, sketching, drawing, that fundamental-based things, because that's what I primarily focus on. Now, as a quick history, I went to the Art Center College in Pasadena. I actually grew up here in Portland, which is why I'm actually here right now. Family's here, friends are here. So I usually visit once in a while. Back then, after high school, I went to the Art Institute here in Portland, and I studied graphic design for 2 years. And then from there, I went down to Pasadena, California, to go to the Art Center College. And that Art Center is where I studied the fundamentals of all the drawing, painting, design language, and also the career direction that I wanted to apply it to. So after Art Center, I then started working in the game industry in concept art for about a good 7 years or so. So from 2004 to about 2013, I was in the industry in-house studio level. And it was multiple studios, up and down LA, down to San Diego. Around 2016 is when I moved back up to LA, but before that period, I started teaching a lot more, investing in on myself in terms of building a brand, property, basically self-publishing, creating books, and collaborating a lot with different companies and individual artists. And that's been my focus up to this point, and even now, I'm continuing to really push that. And so I've been teaching currently for over a decade, 10 years now, within this fundamental. I started teaching at the Art Center when I was given the opportunity after my mentor had passed away. And they asked me if I would continue his legacy, and his name was Norm Sherman. If you guys Google that name, Norm Sherman, you'll find more information about him if you want to find out about it. Anytime I do a talk or a conversation, I like to always bring him up and recognize a lot of the things I'm going to share with you guys is what I say is an echo from my mentor, Norm. So a lot of the mistakes, of course, when I was very young, was about not really being sure as to like where I wanted to take this stuff or exactly where I wanted to go in terms of my art career, as you've maybe heard also from Amber. My initial intentions when I was in high school to do comic art. So I wanted to do a comic, and graphic novel kind of stuff, and realized very quickly that that was extremely hard to do, and you don't get paid very much. So then I jumped over to the video game side once I found concept art at the Art Center College. From there, as I worked in games, after 7 years of doing it, education kind of crept in after I worked closer with Norm, started working closer with these schools, and given those opportunities, I did really fall in love and the passion within teaching. Now, of course, at that age, 28, 29, I didn't think I would be teaching so immediately and quickly. But given that opportunity, thankfully, I was able to make those strides. I'll even share with you guys a couple of photographs as a really quick start. We'd be doing stuff like this in class, where we'd be at locations, centers, and places to go, observe actual, real subjects and go sketch and draw them. And that's really the primary thing about this thing I'm going to talk about now, the technique of dynamic sketching, which is about training your eyes on being able to observe the world in a specific way to interpret the information efficiently and confidently. So it's no longer about drawing what you see or just copying what you see, because referencing photographs are great to use and we'll always use them as professional artists. But there's a big aspect about being at a location or being able to experience things in real life. Right now, of course, it's more difficult to go out and do things, but as you guys, we start to find the way to get through all this stuff and more things begin to open up and classes might even start to happen again. Being on location or at least experiencing life through your own eyes is something I would highly recommend you keep up as much as possible. This is still something I'm doing currently even now, even during the quarantine. It's not to say I'm going to these crowded places, but we be going outdoors. We go to the parks, national parks, we go to places like nature reserves, and so that we can be just in nature to see the world around us. And even if it is like walking around in cities and you don't really go to like crowded places, you're still experiencing culture, you're still experiencing life. Observation, being able to live, creates the stories for you guys to actually implement towards building something for yourself. And people ask me all the time, it's like, how do you create and draw from your imagination? Like, how are you able to train that part of it? And for me, it comes from being able to observe and experience as much as possible. Not just on things that you can watch, read, and from things of YouTube or videos and social media, which are all great as well, but the unique experiences of being outside and the living parts, which are spontaneous. The people you get to meet, the things you get to see, and the things that you don't expect to see. And those are all influences of stuff that can eventually lead into more visuals, of fuel, of information, inspiration, that you can then move forward into creating your own thing. So now with this technique, dynamic sketching, it is a fundamental base thing to help us, again, confidently express ideas and quick sketch many things onto the page. So of course, primarily we use a lot of pen, paper, analog materials, but when I teach, most of it is of course done through digital. So here in my Photoshop file, we are going to be mostly working here at this moment. Let me get this kind of ramped up. And we'll just start right off by sharing a couple layers. Let's get the proper layer in place. I'm going to go into basically just breaking down how this structure and technique works. Now, again, many of you may be familiar to this. Some of you also might even take my class currently. Some of you may have seen this stuff on live streams. But of course, questions later on would be welcome. And I like to go into this again because hearing these fundamentals and discussing them again always reveals new insight and small bits of information that you may not have picked up on before. So the first part, of course, is about the first several number of weeks in which I teach this class goes into not necessarily about how to draw lines well, but it's about muscle memory. Muscle memory in the physicality of drawing. What I want to talk about right now is not about how do we clean up our lines. How do I get more control? What material do I use? What pen am I using? None of that stuff is truly that important until you get more comfortable within the physical movements and the control of your own body. So muscle memory is a big aspect of drawing. In my opinion, drawing is actually physically demanding, and actually it can be detrimental to your health, okay? It can be dangerous. I don't know if anybody here or if you guys suffer any kind of physical, I guess pain or ailments of any type. Back when I was in school at Art Center, I had a lot of issues with my neck. So I would sit there with my arm like this, crouching down in this angle, drawing, and I'd be sitting there for like 6, 7 hours in that one position, drawing long periods of time. It's an endurance game, it's a marathon. And in the beginning, when you're younger, your body is not trained or physically built enough to do so. So, of course, not thinking that, you end up pulling some things, you strain stuff, and inflammation begins to happen, joints begin to hurt, and you're just a kid, So I've had many people that were like 17, 18, already coming up to me saying, I've got wrist pains and elbow pains and neck pains, and it was for me as well. So I talk about this because most instructors and also in education don't actually get into it enough, the physicality of drawing. So when I do these kind of exercises, which is about line training, we basically draw these kind of lines from the basics of line to arc and waves, and we do straight arc waves, but we repeat them many times over again. Short lines, then medium lines, longer lines, and all in successions. Each of these blocks are a single sheet of paper. And so repeat them. Now you can of course look at this and try to copy some notes if you want to. I won't go directly into doing them live right now, but this kind of gives you a little bit of visual insight. And these are direct notes from current classes I'm teaching right now. So the first week is all about muscle memory training of line. But as you're drawing physically, a couple things of advice. One, the whole entire body is necessary. It's not just your arm. When I say, well, how do you move? How much speed do you have? How do you grip it? First recommendation is that when you grip your pen and tool, not being at the very end of the nib is recommended. Hold it a bit further back away from the nib. When you're doing these kind of lines and you're drawing, one complaint is, I can't see where I'm going. I mess up my lines. Of course, because you're covering up your hand on it. So hold it back from a distance a bit further, and then try to have a looser grip. Tightening it, death grips are gonna give you that constriction and limitation of movement. So you gotta loosen up. My suggestions of warming up and training, 2-3 hours of sessions, take a break, half an hour at the most. Come back into it again. If I'm saying an entire day, I can manage 6-7 hours. 2 hours, take a break, come back into it again. Again, some people can only draw 2 hours a day. Draw 1 hour, take a break, come back into an hour. I've done sessions of 9 hours of drawing it straight when I was like in school. And I'd be not sleeping basically, up 2-3 nights just working on homework. Now these are things that we put ourselves through. It was never requested, but we just felt like that was supposed to be done. But these are now new things I want to be able to share. Not new, but more of awareness is that people need to hear. Take a lot of breaks, all right? So when it comes to the physical part, grip is one thing. Don't tighten, loosen up. And it comes from the shoulder, elbow to the wrist. It's not just a finger, it's not just one area. My hand is always in contact to the page or on a surface of a Cintiq. I'm sliding along and moving at the hand. Speed is your basic just experience. What you find by is just moving, finding your comfort zone. Whether you go slow or fast, there's no right or wrong. Find your comfort zone within grip, distance, and speed. But shoulders should be straight. Try not to lean too much on one side or the other, all right? And the back needs to be straightened. So working cores and stuff like that. Now I'm not saying you have to go to the gym, lift weight and that kind of stuff, but just be mindful. Be mindful of it. As soon as you catch yourself slouching, you catch yourself gripping tightly, you have to be aware. That's the key thing about it. Awareness is the key thing. But the way to initiate this is if you have your phone, set up a timer on your phone on the clock. 10 minutes. Draw 10 minutes, timer goes off, step away, and just think, what am I doing? How am I moving? Should I go faster? Should I go slower? Am I gripping too tightly? And then from there, move on. From things like lines, we also then play with things like circles and ellipses, rotational shapes and forms, because the things that we now build with, whether a straight line or rounded shape, we then use them to construct the things that we can observe in nature or from photographs and references. So whether I'm drawing a human being, an animal, or a car, something of stylization or characters that I want to make, it's all built from the natural strokes of line and shape that we can put together as a formula. Think of it like a verbal language. We have letters, then we put together for words. We then create sentences and essays and poems. So it's a visual language, and the line is your word. So if you put them together and string them together in a certain way, we have a visual information that communicates to an audience. So from there, again, physicality. Here, rotation, the idea is movement. So speed, you can move fast or you can move slow. Find it. It's not about trying to get that answer immediately. It's through extension of mileage of time. And this is a lifelong commitment for me. I've started drawing since the age of 5, and I am now 40 years old. Okay, so I've been drawing for over 30 years of my life. And today, to this point, I'm still discovering new things. One thing, of course, is because I'm teaching it. Another part is because I interact with a lot of people online. I get to see what they do. They get to teach me things. So I'm very open to understand the things that I still am poor at and things I have strengths in. And so it's not about being perfect, it's about being confident. Okay? The only way to find confidence is to fail and then to succeed. So through this community of effort, getting together with people that you know, friends you might have, family as well too, to help that encouragement and support so that if you also fail, that knowing that it's okay and you can keep trying from there. So this part of it, again, with the physicality, going back to it as always, sitting positions. Sitting is actually a very harmful thing for your body, all right? So you don't want to stay sitting for too long. The idea, of course, is watch how you're sitting. If you're sitting at the end of a chair, blood flow is crucial. So any area that you have any kind of constraint or squeeze, for me, I don't know if you can see it, but when I'm sitting down and working on my Cintiq at home, I actually get numb fingers and hands sometimes. And the reason why that happens is because I'm sitting, my arm pulls into my body because I'm trying to control it. So I squeeze an artery underneath my armpit. So blood flow gets constricted and I get numb fingers. So I have to stop and readjust. If you're sitting in a hard chair, your bottom ends of the thighs can also be cutting off blood flow. So the blood flow is not moving very well. You get numb hands, numb fingers. That's an important thing to kind of pay attention to. Take a break, step away from it. With the Cintiq or Photoshop, you can also, of course, rotate the canvas, and you can do that as much as you want to. In a sketchbook, rotate your book as much as you want. Circles, again, this is about being able to show repetition of movement. You can't draw a perfect circle, but we can try and get close enough. So in this situation, we create a series of blocks and bars. And as we rotate in circular motion, we repeat many and multiple times. I can't draw a perfect circle, but I will get close enough. So then in repetition, I then create more circles. I repeat, they're wonky, but as I get more comfortable with it, they start to get tuned up and they get closer and closer. Now you might think, this seems really mundane, monotonous, tedium, but you have to understand this is building blocks of muscle memory, and you need to have this because when I draw, there's no thinking. The expression and the act of it is so effortless. Drawing to me is as easy as breathing or talking. So that's why I think this area of exercise and mileage is extremely important to focus on. Now, of course, as a fundamental, I'm sure many people ask about things like anatomy, figurative stuff, perspective, form building, still life. And all those areas within schools and education, whether through university or independent schools or online learning, you can then basically piece it together yourself. Basic questions about even education. Should I go to a college? Should I not? The answer to any of these kind of questions, or whatever they may be, is to go find out yourself, okay? No matter what I say, it's all based on my experience. And I can give you the advice to it, but your experience will be different. And the only way to know is to go find out and try, and if it doesn't fit for you, leave. Go do something else. You might think, but I don't want to waste time. I don't want to waste money. But you don't want regret. Try it, make that opinion and answer, then move forward, okay? So here, of course, I went to College of Art Center, and I learned these techniques from Norm, and they were tried and true, and they were used really well. And I picked up on it instantly and recognized the strength of it, and I then continued on using this for many number of decades. Right here, we talked about a little bit of perspective, the basic knowledge of it. What is perspective in the first place? It's an optical illusion about creating three-dimensional depth and space on a two-dimensional plane. So by using lines and shapes, we can create overlaps, convergence of line, and we get three-dimensional forms. But should I learn perspective now or later? The idea is learn it eventually, or when you feel like you have the opportunity. Right now, even in this technique, you can just draw. Even if it's not perfect, if it doesn't work well in perspective, we can still see things, construct shapes and forms very simply. So even if it's not all perfect technically, it's not about technicality. We're talking about visual accuracy, all right? So right here, on the right-hand side, we're talking about drawing boxes optically. There's no setup of perspective there. I have no horizon line, no vanishing point. I'm just saying, let's draw a box. Best way to draw a box, start with a Y. Now I have all sides of a box. Now I just connect the edges together. So now I can just rotate that Y in different angles of views. I connect those edges and create different kinds of boxes. This is optically creating a form that feels that exists within a three-dimensional space. That's it. So once we get that idea, when I observe the world around me, we understand that things are three-dimensional objects, and it's just a perception of depth based on convergence and distance. So from form, we can also move to things like three-dimensional forms using a wireframe. So once we finish up this kind of slideshow stuff, I'll do a couple drawings and sketches for you through reference photograph. Using organic objects, things like a circle, of course, sorry, I keep clicking on it, but a circle is the most basic of shape, and we have the 5 core forms. So with these 5 forms, we can put them together to construct the things that we can observe in real life, whether it's a person, a fish, an animal, car. But we gotta also be able to manipulate this object. So I wanna be able to stretch them, I wanna be able to squeeze them, and pull and squeeze and twist and create all these kind of physical actions on a two-dimensional level. So even if it was just a random squiggly blob, right? But it's still a two-dimensional drawing. Again, we use perspective for three-dimensional depth, but we can also create three-dimensional forms by adding things like cross contours. So having a line and adding a wireframe, which gives you the idea of the three-dimensional curvature of that object. So all this information here kind of gives you the sense about how we can take random blobs and create form with them. Here it gives you an idea of taking silhouettes of things like fish, and we can incorporate things like actual lines that give you the turn of 3 dimensions of that object. Naturally, the world around us gives us that information visually. Think of a piece of bamboo, a plant. As it grows, you see segmentation in between each section, and those lines are the wireframes, the cross contours, that wrap that gives us that 3-dimensional sense. Human beings, arms and torsos and bodies, we have lines and wrinkles and overlaps that conveys that information as well too. So right now, again, this leads itself towards the idea of how to observe, pick up on visual cues, and interpret them, capture them, and put them on the page. Not copy, but to interpret. Keep that in mind. Here's additional, oh, we already got that one. So again, the idea of being able to pull and stretch different directions, and we even think about the plant of the bamboo that also then branches in different directions also. So naturally, human beings, we have a shoulder down the forearm, down the fingers. The central line, the gesture, a spine, or any sort of central line of any object can give us a sense of how the wireframe can wrap around it. So think of a human arm. Internally, we have a bone, 1 bone, 2 bone, 5 digits. In those bones are the center lines around them. So, and they also branch off in different directions at the end of the fingers. As we do so, we branch off this way or that way, and we create the wireframe that follows the cross contour independently. So why are we doing all this? Again, to basically communicate a sense of 3-dimensional objects in space now. How is it applied to observational drawing? Simplification. If I can take a shape that's super simple and give it a 3-dimensional feel, the silhouette can also feel like the thing that we're seeing in person as well. Here, we can also then interpret the idea of doing more render. So through this process of render, before we even actually get to that, there's also this aspect, which is, we'll just stick with that for now. The render part, which is using hatching techniques. And as we use the wireframe as it wraps around an object, people ask, well, which direction do I hatch into? How do I know that's the proper direction? Stick with the simplest approach as always. Right now, the simplest thing I can give it as advice towards hatching is to always follow the wireframe of the object itself. I know the direction as it wraps around the object. I hatch around that area based on the light direction now. Light is coming up from the top, shadows to the bottom. I hit the core shadow in the in-between sections. Hatching, super simple. I just stack it and move around the object in the shadow side only. Now I have a focal point, which is the idea of controlling the focus of where I put that detail. The reason why I do this is because it makes it more efficient. I spend less time over rendering something, and it communicates a sense of depth as well too. So anything that we create in terms of texture, detail, information of function, light and shadow can be consolidated into one single area, and it makes your job a lot easier. Again, you don't need to give an audience 100% of all that information. Give them enough, and they will then look at it and understand what's going on and fill in the rest for you. This can also build confidence, because you know you can do this in a shorter amount of time, moving on to another drawing. If I said, now repeat that again, you spent 3 hours doing that, it's tiring, physically and mentally. So your body feels tired, you start to ache a little bit, you don't want to do it over, but the mileage is important to do it again, you learn more from it. If I can constrain the time to about 10, 15, 20 minutes, you finish it, move on, I can do it again from there. Mileage then is the key, repetition is the key, right? Application. Now from all that shape building, form building, a sense of optical perspective to creating things like cross contours and three-dimensional forms, again, that is all the tools and the basic building blocks to then use them applied towards things that we can now observe in the real world. Now we start with nature, but in the class we also migrate over to things like mechanical objects, man-made objects, and even, of course, human beings can be built the same way. Each system, there's no best or worse. There's no, don't think of it as black and white. The way you want to approach this educationally is, okay, I can learn dynamic sketching techniques from me or somebody else out there. You can take figure drawing classes if you want to. You can take other still life drawing classes. And each class will have strengths and weaknesses of things that you like and don't like. Everything I teach, 100% of it will not stick to everybody, but there might be a percentage of it. And all you got to do is take those elements and put them together by action of mileage, by pursuing it and doing it, and you'll then discover. That self-discovery has to happen. I'm not here to give you guys answers. I'm not telling you what to do. But I'm here to show you these are things that I've done that help to build a level of confidence and apply to all the work I've done in the last 20 years of professional experience. So this foundation, as basic as it is still something I do every single day. So that question, of course, is do you draw every day? Well, physically, I would like to, and a lot of times I do. But there are certain days I don't get to because either I'm traveling, family stuff, or something else happens. But mentally, I am still drawing because I'm still observing. I'm still recording and absorbing that information. I process it because I've done it so many times now. Again, this is now the fuel source. If I want to create some kind of creature, well, here's all that great information from insects I can apply it to. How do we study it? Specific control of what angle of view you're looking at, the reference images that you select from, the actual selection of what you see and how you draw them. All that is a process that has to be mindful to. So in the beginning, if I even select a reference photograph, what we start with is crucial. If I just selected a random image of a bug, you could draw it, yeah. But how much will you pick from that? Maybe a very limited amount because it's isolated to that one experience. But if I said now I have a string of process of, I'm going to start with a top view, then I'll do a side view, then I'll do a top-down three-quarter view. The angles of views are helping me understand the proportions and the shapes of an animal, of an insect. Now you say, but all of these insects are different. You have a longhorn beetle, you have a praying mantis over there. But if I can show you the archetype of how an animal is built like an insect, because even though visually they all look different, I can show you the pattern of how they're actually biologically put together. It's all very similar. They have three body parts: head, thorax, abdomen. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Every insect on this planet follows that same pattern. They all have 6 legs. We're talking about insects right now, not arachnids. So each species or groupings have their own patterns that we're looking for. Think of it like this. If I draw a human being, the human being archetype, we all share similarity of proportion and also anatomy. Now, of course, people come in different sizes and different proportions, but we share a similarity to it. But if I show you the archetype, male to female body types, then of course you apply to the individual person, you would see an observation. So we're learning just the pattern and the formula from it. Then you got to be able to manipulate all those elements of visual. Same thing here. Just focusing on one bug, one insect, then you can apply that information to any insect on this planet. If I can show you how to draw a fish, which starts off by saying side view, I just have a head, a body, and goes into a tail, 1, 2, 3, every single fish on this planet can follow the same kind of rule set. Then it's just a proportional change. All fish have the same number of fins, essentially. So as we understand that premise, even as creation, I can say, well, you know what, I'm going to make the head smaller, I'm going to make the body stretched out and go like this, I'm going to make the tail really long like that. I'm just making this up. Now, there might be a fish out there that looks like this, but what it does is it gives me the tool to be able to express freely and extremely confidently. But I also can now memorize a lot less. If I said, let's try to learn all the different species of fish that are out there, it's overwhelming. There's just so much information. But if I said, let's just learn one fish, one insect, one equine animal, one type of human being, based on form, that information, you can adapt it every single time, and it can then migrate. Because a system of understanding a breakdown, if that makes sense, okay, that means other things I'm drawing, there must be some sort of pattern there. And that's what you have to find now, the pattern and system of how to break something down. Now, of course, this will take a long time to be able to do so. You might think, well, it's animals, though. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that complex like insects. Well, even something a bit more complex of a mammal, there is a system there. So here's a zebra, and these photographs are my photographs. So a couple months ago, me and Amber were actually in Africa, in Kenya, and we're observing live animals like big cats and zebras like this. And we're out there because we're trying to experience real life. We're outdoors, and we're drawing on location. We're in trucks, driving around, and we're sketching and drawing. And we took these photographs, and I use them for things like demos. I use them for things like observational drawing or creative illustration. So here, as a breakdown, I show you, again, the angles of views, the bone structure, side view, live animal, side view, 3/4 view of the zebra, and on location, I'm being mindful of these shots. Then I have a close-up of the head. Now I have a study pattern. As you go from the side view, I do a breakdown. We go from the head, which is basically a balloon, and a string, which is the spine, and from there I do a breakdown of independent parts. As I have those 1, 2, 3 elements within the torso, those parts of breakdown I can apply to every single animal on this planet. The balloon and string I can apply to every single animal on this planet. Now it's just a proportional change. So if you're saying, well, I can draw horses, but I can't draw a lion. Well, that's because you're convinced that the lion is more difficult for some reason. You are telling yourself that. But for me, everything out there in the world, there is no favorite thing I like to draw. Everything to me is the same. I mention this all the time in lectures, but it's kind of timing-wise also a coincidence. But I see the world kind of like the Matrix. So the things around me are broken down to shapes only. So I don't experience like, oh, that's a car, and it's going to be harder to draw. Everything to me is equal in terms of just shape breakdown. So it's a system and a formula I've understood, and it's become so ingrained. There's no more thinking behind it anymore. It's automatic at the moment. If I see it, my brain automatically just breaks it down. So from something as complex as animals, we can also look at things like machines. So you might think, well, okay, living animals, organics, but what about mechanical objects? Same kind of deal. What does a car have? A hood, a main cab, and a trunk space. 1, 2, 3, right? So the rule of thirds, but also the 1, 2, 3 count is something of a pattern I'm noticing over and over and over again. Singularly within a single part of anatomy, overall as an entire human being, all the way up to a vehicle or a car. So within that, look at the reference. Side view, 3/4 view, perspective view. Side view, flat 3/4 view, perspective view. So I don't just randomly choose an image. You have to curate it, and you have to be mindful about how you're processing your research part, application. So these are some of the fundamentals. And again, I can't explain the actual breakdown of all these independent subjects, but I want to get into an actual bit of drawing now. And I want to show you about how I actually use this live in a moment, and I will do an actual piece for you, okay? And from there, if we have enough time, I might lead it into a creative drawing. So if we're talking about fundamentals, observing and recording, how do I then apply that more to the creative side, imaginative side? So let's go to a new layer. And what I want to bring up, I have a folder here of images and photographs that I've taken, okay? This is at the Yellowstone National Park, and this is from last year as well, too. So we're out there observing things like grizzlies and bison and elks and deers and all that kind of stuff. And these are images that I like to get out and observe in the real world. So of course, these animals are far off in distance, and I have a very long lens, and I'm able to capture them in person. And so we're out there also drawing, sketching live, because I travel with people like Amber and also other friends that are artists as well. And so they're all very interested and curious of the natural world and want to record it with me. So then I bring it here with you guys. I want to select an image here for the moment to study from. I haven't selected exactly what I'm going to draw just yet, and these images, even though I've had them, I haven't studied all of them. Some of these animals I am familiar with, Others, not so much. Either way, we'll try to find a way to break it down. This is actually one of my favorite photos. I actually caught a photograph of a black bear blowing a bubble out of his mouth. It was so random. Beautiful rams out there. Again, these are all just live photos in the moment, catching it best they can. Great action shots. So here's a side view, 3/4 view from before. Some of the cubs. And I'm usually there for a string of a weekend. We'll travel out there, hang out a weekend, come right back. So I probably plan to try to go back to things like Yellowstone or the Teton Mountains in January or February. So let's see if we can find an image that we can maybe go for. I like this image a lot. This particular bison shot is a really fantastic one. Great for side view. The head's turned, but I also had another photograph that we just saw earlier of the bison laying down, and that was a great side view of the head. So we might take this shot and the other shot of the buffalo and see if we can maybe study this one as a breakdown. It's a complex animal. There's a lot of bulk to it. Anatomically, there's a lot of stuff that's hidden. So visualizing information can be difficult with this animal, which is why I might use it. Let's keep going and see if we can find something else too. A friend of mine, Manny, this is how close some of the animals were. Some of the grizzlies and bears really far away. Always drawing on location. Mothers and cubs all over. Yoga poses. And I think we're going to be good to move on to the bison maybe here. You know what though? I've gotten requests for a lot of bears as well because bears have so much of that fur that's really complex and hard to draw. There's a nice side view of the bear as well. And I wanted to see if I have a side view shot of the head, which I think we did. So let's, you know what, as much as I wanted to do the bison, I have studied that photograph of the side view before. And what I want to do for you guys is do something I don't usually do. So bears I've sketched and drawn, but I haven't studied any one of these images. So what I'm going to do first is grab a photograph of the side view here of the grizzly mom. I'm going to put that off to the corner on this end. And we're going to grab another shot if we can find a side view head. If we don't, it's okay. We'll just maybe go for a 3/4 view. I think the one right here where she's coming up the mountain is also quite nice. And again, it's a complex animal. Anatomically, hard to decipher. All the muscle, the bone structure is hidden by the fur and the fat. It's hard to visualize. So we'll keep these here for the moment. Let me just double check and see if there's anything else we want to maybe pull from. That shot, that shot. Here's a black bear side view, but again, we're sticking with the grizzly for the moment. I think that should be good to go. All right, let's stick with those for the moment. Now, of course, these are photographs that I've taken, and taking photographs that you find online are also welcome. You should do so as well. All right. Let me see if I can change the view. There we go. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And the brush I am currently using is a standard Photoshop brush under the actual, this is a mega pack, but it's called Kyle's drawing brushes. It's a standard one under the actual brush set. So I don't have any special brushes. I don't make my own. I use standard Photoshop versions. Layer it right now at the moment. I don't even know what the file size of this thing is. This is 11 by 17. In terms of resolution, looking at about 300. Okay, so I'm not going to change that parameter. In this situation of doing studies of digital, I think if you go standard 800 by 11 or more, 300 dpi, you're going to be fine. I'm going to use a single layer. I don't do a lot of layer stacking. Even if I do an underlay study, you're going to keep it on one layer if you can. So let's do our first study initially here. I'm going to keep track of time as always. So it's about 12:15. Let's spend about maybe 10 minutes doing a real quick study, and we'll move on real fast. As I'm doing this, if anybody here has a question, if anybody out there has a question, I don't mind answering them while I'm drawing, all right? So the first part of the study, let's go into the mother bear, and we're going to go into the balloon. Let's go into the string. The string is, again, the gesture of the bear itself. Notice I'm doing cut, cut, cut. I'm not trying to consistently control one line all the way through. People are looking for expectation of that perfect line, but you're not going to get it. So go from section to section. Short to medium length lines are going to be the most important for you. When would you ever really draw a long line like this, right, in application? Very rarely. So it's usually short strokes. From there, I'm going to internally look for sections of the body of the bear. 1, 2, 3. Now these circles don't represent actual anatomy of the animal itself. What it represents is the location of where that anatomy exists. That's it. So I'm not saying this is a scapula, or this is a thigh bone, or that's a pelvis. It's not. It's just circles. It's just placement. It gives me context of location. Once I have that in place, I can see that the hump on the back is probably the scapula coming up a bit higher, or the top of the vertebrae. So I'm going to place in a line to kind of indicate a shoulder position. I'm going to put a dot for where the shoulder is. The shoulder usually aligns pretty well with the thigh bone section where the hip and the thigh connect together. So I'm going to bridge that line across. Notice I'm going to do a lot of draw through here. As it comes down, the elbow will come down this direction, connect right about there. So this circle, the secondary one, 1, 2, 3, comes up high, but I can always add more volume. All right? So the idea here is that we're setting up an underlay, inner construction, and we're adding, adding, adding as like a sculpture. So if that's where I indicate my elbow, usually the knee, as it comes forward, also aligns relatively closely to where the elbow is. And then we can see that the actual bottom belly of the bear and the chest comes down much lower. I'm going to add that volume. So from there, I'm going to go down to where the lower portion of the limbs, on the back side as well too. The wrist is going to be back there. The ankle is going to be down over here. Now the thing about this is that I can also reposition the animal if I want to, slightly for a better drawing and sketch. Do not be so dependent on the reference. It's only inspiration. It's only to guide you in understanding what it can actually look like, but you don't want to copy the photograph. Interpret the information through shape, simplicity. Now this doesn't look like much just yet, but as we further progress through, we'll get a lot more information in there. As we go down to the head, let's just kind of place down some shapes that represent the muzzle, down to where the nose is. What do you see is the question. I see things like circles, I see things like boxes, but you might see something very different, and that's okay. So what you interpret, from there you make decisions on, and as you make those decisions, they become a little bit more hardwired in your system. As we wrap that shape around, down to the lower portion of the forearm, into where the snow is, and the paw is gone. Saying, well, I don't know what the paw looks like. Well, then don't draw it, okay? Look at it later on for another photograph. In this situation, it's hidden by the snow, so we cover it by the ground plane. Here, the lower back of the legs comes forward a little bit like that. And now we just basically have a silhouette of the animal itself. Even though the animal is all round, 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 we don't only use that kind of shape, we play with the idea and concept of straights and curves. So areas that I can kind of find a section that has a straight line into, I will cut into it, and curve things areas as well. Contrast of line and shape. As you do one quick study, this is not about how pretty we can make the drawing. This is not an illustration technique. This is a communication technique. So I want to be efficient in my means of breaking things down to show you what I see. From that, repetition. The idea is to repeat this again. Okay, so for the sake of time, we'll just copy this one section. If we bring it over, let's just say that we had drawn it one more time, okay, in repetition. Now, you're going to want to make adjustments. In this first sketch, you're going to want to say, well, what's off about it? The head's too small? Well, let's make it a little bit bigger. Larger. The hump back here, a little bit taller. So right now at the moment, my drawings, people ask me, it's like, how are you perfect with this stuff all the time? I am not. I am constantly making mistakes. But the idea is that I don't get hung up on them. I'm aware of them, I indicate it, and I move on. Next sketch. Not the current one, because if you're trying to salvage what you had just done, it's now just a repair job. And it always shows those small scabs you're scraping away at. The idea is to move forward and just start fresh. And from that, make adjustments from it. So if the secondary sketch, if we had started over here, let's say we wanted to apply some of those adjustments. If those were things I wanted to do, I'm going to add to that over here. Let's make the head down this direction, ear out to here. You might think, well, those parts I thought you didn't want to actually change or make a correction on. I can make the judgment to try and see if it will work. If it doesn't, we'll do it again, basically, okay? So the best thing about it is to find out those answers again yourself. Is it going to work? Is it not? Should I try to save it? Should I not? Try. Try and then fail, okay? If you're too hesitant, if you're too afraid of not making, or if it's not going to come out very well, then you're never really going to pursue it and get that answer for sure. Let's make that back end a little bit higher as well too. Let's place in a few additional details now. This is where the eye goes in this section, down to the muzzle, into the nose section. And what I want to do right now is become familiar to the bear. Because once I become familiar to it now, I want to think about, at the moment, what I'm doing. I'm going to talk to you guys as I'm also drawing and thinking, is that my mind is creatively now processing this. Because right now, at the moment, I'm doing an interpretation of a photograph. But in my mind, I'm thinking of, what do I want to use this for? What am I going to create? I don't know just yet. I haven't planned anything with you guys. So in the moment live, what I'm going to draw next, creatively, is all very open. It's going to happen. But we'll see. So we studied one angle of view of the bear, grizzly. And again, interpretation of information is very minimal, kept in check. I'm not trying to render it. This is not an illustration. I just want to understand its shape, proportion, and form. That's it. Intention is very clear for me. Now I could take this drawing and further push darks, shadow shapes, rendering, all that stuff. The question is, if I had shown again that drawing, or maybe if we do something else here, hold on. Let's escape out of the, oh, there we go. Real quickly, before I move on to the next sketch, I just want to like show something. Let's go to the art station. I'll just show you one drawing. It's something I would do on the side. Let's say it's something from the blacksmith, a character that I created years ago. Let's say I show this drawing right here. Now this is with like brush pen, ink, and it's a very complex piece. There's a lot there informationally. And I asked you now, looking at this drawing that I've done with brush pen and spent a lot of time producing high amount of detail, information, and care into it, and I asked you, out of these two pieces of the drawing, which one is finished, right? And this is something I bring up in my live streams all the time. The common answer for most people is, well, the one to the right, that's the blacksmith, that has more finish to it. There's more detail, it's more refined. My argument to that is that each and every single one of these sketches are finished, because my intention from the bare sketches was to find proportion and shape only. I knew when I had to stop. So if that was the goal, and I'd done that, I'm done. That's a finished drawing. If my intention is to create more information of detail, light and shadow and value, texture information, my intention and goal is there now. So I have to meet those parameters before I know I can stop and move forward in something else. So looking at this, it can be confusing for some people because like, well, this is not a very good looking drawing, but this is not about aesthetics. This is about being able to understand something, right? So if we want to understand it, we have to be able to break down the information, and being very clear about the intention of a breakdown is where you can then understand when to stop to move forward again. People get hung up. They get hung up and they get stuck on drawings. So moving forward, let's do one study of the head on the mother bear down here. We'll push a bit more detail on that one. Let's push these drawings to the right. And we'll do one head study, and then we'll go into a creative drawing. So here, pull it in this direction, same thing. I want to find the shape, head shape, across it, brow, down to the actual muzzle, into the nasal cavity, boxes, circles, shapes. I'm not getting hung up on perfection of line, lightly placing it in, cutting away shapes. Speed-wise, again, do not be concerned. That should not be your priority. Spend time if you need to, and get faster as you become more familiar. That is the answer to speed for me. Being speedy and moving your hand fast is not speed. Being familiar and making fast decisions is what you do. Making quick decisions, your hand now reacts to it. So I just want the upper portion of the body. Focal point will go to the head. From this, let's place in where the position of the eye is. As you go into the information, again, details are like, well, I can't see what's going on in some of those parts. Well, you indicate it. You suggest it. If you want more clarified details, research more of it. Find more reference images. You can't just make it up if you haven't seen it before. So look for the answers, research as much as you can, and hopefully you have enough to move forward on. So as we go to the lower portions, things like the hair, it's like, how do I deal with all that hair? Well, the answer of anything of detail comes down into the shape of something. So if I have a ball and it says covered in hair, people will do this. That doesn't really communicate a very clear sense of what's going on. But if I took the shape and it said the hair is moving in clusters and clumps, I use shape of silhouette to group it together. I can understand a light direction, a form shadow, and the hatching goes on the inside. So the silhouette strengthens the read from a distance, and the hatching communicates the actual volume of information and detail. This is going to make it very flat and not very realistic. So as I go to the outer edge and silhouette of areas, I clump and group hair together, but I don't want to make it so uniform pattern. Naturally, we're going to have the hair group and have areas that are smooth, but I'm also making design decisions. I'm choosing where I want to put information like this. Come down to the ear, in this section. Light is coming from the top, and I can do grouping of shadow shapes. So these are lines that are now grouping areas of darks and shadows. As we get to this point, I'll feel that I have enough information to move forward on, and we'll go into one last creative drawing. And again, if anybody has any thoughts, questions, You are welcome to share them, ask them. Once we finish up on this part, let's get a little bit of hatching in there. Now, line direction of hatching. Which way do I go? You've told me I should follow the cross contour with an object of a form, wireframe. Well, the wireframes are now going around this region, here, around this way, around this way. Should I follow those cross contours? Well, it's all about, again, decision making. What you choose and then being consistent with it. So in this decision, I have two choices. I can move with the form of the actual bear, going this way, or I can move with the top surface of the hair itself. The hair has a natural grain of pattern, and it moves from the inside of the body out in this natural pattern. So now I'm going to choose one particular direction and then stick with it. So here I am going to choose with the natural hair pattern of the bear. Going this way, internally to the eye, we're going to darken up some regions, and we're going to go a short stroke, hatching, stacking it, moving along the hair in the shadow space that I now partitioned graphically. So it moves out this direction, follows the direction of the fine hair. So now that I have that, in my mind right now, as I'm interpreting this information and I'm spilling this dialogue at you, my brain is actually doing something else, okay? So as I'm doing this and speaking, my thought process is actually in a completely different world for you guys. My brain was spilling images at me, experiences, movies, stuff that I've read, games that I've played. And the initial question was, what do I want to do with this bear creatively? What do I want to draw next? This is a study, but what do I want to draw for fun? So in my brain as I was drawing, for some reason, a movie popped in my mind. And the movie that popped into my mind was a movie called The 13th Warrior. I have no idea why, okay? It just happens. My brain's always presenting me ideas with, hey, what about this? And what about that? And do you remember this one over here? And so for some reason, The 13th Warrior came up. It has an actor, Antonio Banderas, and it's about this guy who comes from the Middle East, Arabia, and he goes to the North countries. And it's like old times, like Viking times. And in that movie, the Vikings are battling against these like hordes of like barbarians. And in them, these tribes are wearing bear skins. That was a connection, okay? As I was drawing bears, my brain thought of, oh, I remember bears in this movie. Like, remember that? So all of a sudden I thought about that. It's like, that'd be kind of fun to draw this kind of Viking-like character with a bearskin suit with a helmet kind of thing. So did I choose consciously to draw that? Not necessarily. It was just initial spark of an idea, led from this initial study. Now I made the decision. I kind of want to create a character type of thing that's got this cool bearskin armor. Maybe a head study from that. Okay, maybe we'll go from there. So I've already made a decision now, and it's all very immediate. As I speak to you, when I'm doing it personally on my own, these kind of processes happen within microseconds. They're just instant, constantly. So because I've experienced so much, from living, from watching movies, comics, games, and also traveling, experience-wise, I have such a deep depth and level of well of inspiration visually that any moment I sit there, I never have a moment like, I don't know what to draw. I never have a moment like, I'm stumped. I've never had a singular moment in the last 15 years where I felt burnt out, or I felt like I can't draw, or I don't know what I want to do. Every single moment I sit down, my brain is always feeding me something. And it's not because I'm special, it's not because I'm talented, it's because I've experienced so much. And so being open-minded to have as much exposure as I can, especially within the idea of observation sketching, has really given me the strength to be able to actually go in there and knock it out. So now that we got the bear study, we have some body studies, head study, let's go into now a creative drawing. We'll use it as a fuel source, and what I'm going to do at the moment is I'm going to shrink all this layer down. Let's see, Control E. There we go. It's on one layer. I want to shrink it as a study base sketch onto the left. And on the lower portion down over here, I'm going to do one last drawing. And at this point, we're going to draw some kind of character Viking-like thing. And so let's build it. All of it's there, resource information, inspiration, interpretation, and now creative drawing. So I'll build it with you guys. Well, you know what, let's go straight to it because we're time-wise, we're going to be a little bit short. So let's go into first the top of the bear. I'm going to start with the nose. And you might think, well, do you construct on your own time? I do, but the thing is, when I construct, you don't actually see the construction as I do. Over time, what happens is that when you learn this kind of fundamental technique, it's your job and responsibility to find shortcuts. And as you find shortcuts, there are things that you don't have to do as much. Right now, I went from the very beginning, circle, 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 balloon and string, but eventually you might not do all that construction. You might just need enough to move forward, to implement the visual details and know where they go. So for the moment, I don't need to construct this entire head because I know where things will go. There's going to be some canine teeth over here. And this is going to be a top part of like a head, headdress. So once we get that information in place, it's going to have like all the hair and the puff on the side. Again, all these small little marks of indication are little tiny marks of construction that people will know or not know, but I will definitely know in terms of what the use is. As we get into now groupings of shadow shapes, let's get the guy's head in there. So I'm going to put a brow inside here. It's like some kind of crazy Viking kind of character. And you're going to have like other kinds of material, fabrics and leathers and stuff around them. And I remember they had these like crazy horns and stuff on their backs, as if they took like bison horns or rib structures and bone structure and put them on it. For those of you that have been joining in for the entire talk, as you can see the contrast of what Amber was talking about and I'm talking about, I tend to draw things that are a bit more aggressive, you know, and things that are a bit more monsters and characters and creatures and stuff like this. So hopefully we covered the entire facets and features of people that are interested in certain things. So now that I have the information and detail in there, again, this head construction, I don't really need a circle and shape and planes. That information is so ingrained now that I don't have to really think about it. So decisions, again, like I said, have all been made already beforehand. There's no more thinking anymore. Now it's just action. Now it's just doing it. And so the enjoyment is fully there because another part of this is that I am not afraid of it. I know that it could still be mistakes. I know it's not going to be perfect, but I really like doing it. It's just really fun to draw. And once you get to that point of a mental state, there is no more than burnout for me because I don't wake up and sleep thinking, oh, I got to get up and do this now. You know, I don't wake up thinking, I can't draw today. I haven't had that kind of thought. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, just because you have them is somehow making you maybe less of a potential to be able to actually be successful in the industry. What I'm saying is that we're striving for this. And I've been thankful that I could reach that due to not me just actively doing it on my own, but because of my mentor Norm, because of school, because of friends, because of family. So it's not just me, but it's the dozens and dozens of people behind me encouraging that. Now I know that not everybody has those opportunities and not everybody has those encouragements, but you should seek them. And you can control your own environment of who you are with, friends and people that you actually want to draw with, and you should try to discover as much of it as possible by putting yourself in a situation to have those opportunities. So take more classes. And if we can't afford them, we'll go online, right? Go to things like Discords, go to things like the live streams and see if you can actually ask questions, see if you can find other communities that can be joined. There are a lot of events maybe online that you can actually attend, whether again, things like Lightbox that Amber mentioned, other Comic-Cons and Expos. Those are also things of my experience that really help grow my ability to communicate, socialize, and also build a network. Technique will only take you so far. And if you rely upon just your ability on how to draw better and paint better, you can stand out to a certain degree, but you better be really, really good at that one thing. And the thing about this is that as much as I love to draw and as much confidence I may have within it, there are people out there that are far better than me, okay? And I recognize this, and I also welcome it, because what that does is it obviously humbles, you know, your approach, and it makes you very fortunate, or feel very fortunate about your experiences, what you've done, because the constant growth is something that you begin to appreciate more, the process of doing it. And as you start to find like-minded people that are also even better, you learn from it, and that learning process is what you fall in love with. Because I know that as fun as I can have with drawing right now, it could be better tomorrow too. And that makes me excited, because then, man, I can't wait to see what my drawing is then tomorrow, right? that excitement hasn't been lost since the age of 5. And since I've been drawing, it's had that same mental approach. I don't feel stressed when I sketch. And I know that for a lot of you, sketching, drawing, creating has a lot of anxiety, has a lot of stress and pressure. What I'm saying is, push as hard as you can to not look for the answer, but to put yourself in a situation for opportunity that you can find ways of letting you embrace it. You're not trying to get rid of those things. Embrace those things. Use them as a strength. They're not weaknesses. People really will be the answer from there, okay? So as we get closer to this part of the finish of this particular sketch, I can take a few questions now if anybody wants to ask them, because we're going to be wrapping up here real soon. Anybody here have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
There was a question in the chat. You've mentioned comic books or comics before. Is there a character or characters that you enjoy drawing?
So from my youth and my past, I was a really big Marvel Western comics fan. You know, I grew up here in the States. Once I got to my teens is when I was introduced and influenced by Asian comics as well, some mangas and stuff like that also. But in high school time, I was still very much infatuated by things like Marvel and whatnot. So honestly, you know, as cliche as it is, it still was things like X-Men and Wolverines and that kind of stuff. But in my youth, when I was a kid, it was actually the Ninja Turtles. I used to draw the Turtles all the time. And the thing about this is that I still draw them now, okay? It hasn't stopped. I mean, I recently did a package design for a Ninja Turtles mini sculpture for a company I'm collaborating with called Plastic Cell. And say, hey, can you draw Donatello for us? And I'll do they asked me to do the cover. It's like, sure, absolutely. And these are characters I'm still drawing now. And even then, it's like, even if it's not something for a professional or some kind of client need, I'll still draw characters I'm super familiar with. And I think it's actually very good for you guys to pursue things of your interest. And people are concerned about like, but I seem to draw the same thing over and over again. Use that though as a warm-up period. Warm up with the things that you like to do, that you know that you can do. And then you move into things that are more challenging. Homework, projects, other kinds of other designs. But start with something to get that initial warm-up, get that blood flowing, and then get into the more challenging stuff. So never shy away from stuff that you know that you're really good at, or you feel like you just really are into, right? Don't shy away from your interests, please. Somebody else have a question?
I have a question. Since you are a person that grew up here in the Portland area, do you have a place here in Portland that you remember as a place that you like to go and sketch, or a particular scene in Portland that you like to draw?
So back then when I was in high school and also my 2-year college, I never actually went to locations like the zoo or museums to go draw. The observational drawing didn't really initiate or start until I got to Art Center in college. But I was sketching all the time with friends. So in high school, I met up with an old friend of mine. I was 14 when I started high school in 1995, and he was 1 year older than I was. His name is Izzy Madrano. He lives here in Portland right now. He's worked on a lot of projects for places at Sony. He's also doing stuff right now for Wizards of the Coast, Magic cards and stuff like that. And he's very good in terms of design and painting. Good educator as well too. But he and I met when we were just teens. And we used to go to the Sherry's all the time. And we go to that diner and we stay up, you know, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., just sketching and drinking sodas all night. And so after school, you know, I would do a little bit of the homework and we hang out and we go to the Sherry's and we just stay there all night sketching, drawing things like comics, and we come up with ideas. The thing about this is that collaborative effort of not just building friends and networking, but being able to share ideas on a creative level, it hones your ability to understand the strengths that you have and the weaknesses you also have. Each individual has a certain thing they can offer, and you pick up on that. I didn't think of it that way. Or you're pursuing this, I never done this before. He did a lot of digital art back then. I only just was kind of behind him. So he would always also help me along by saying, hey, do you want to color some of my pages of comics I'm making? So I help him block things out, and we paint them together. So this kind of constant pursuit by going together was what helped me to get exposed to additional, you know, content and inspiration, story ideas, and also ways of actually pursuing things like technology or art techniques and mediums. Because, of course, I would have ventured them into them at some point, but someone like him and also someone like me together is what helped us progress a bit further. So places like that we go to all the time. And honestly, we probably still would. So I'll probably meet up with him at some point. You know, we still talk online often, and if I see him here, we'll probably hang out at some bar or even Sherry's and sketch again. So. Yeah, so we're getting there now. Again, if anybody else has any comments, thoughts, questions, please do let me know. If you guys are local to the area, the Wacom Experience Center is now open. You guys should come by and check out some of the stations out here, test out some of the products. For me, my main digital products are still, PC to Wacom tablets. I have my own Cintiq as well too. Most of my work personally is analog, so I do a lot of pen, pencil, paper, that kind of stuff, watercolors. But for any professional work, it's strictly digital. And it has to do with the idea of deadlines, the idea of quick turnarounds, but also for any changes that the client might need. It usually goes there. Yeah. And of course, diversify, experience many things. And the analog to digital approach go hand in hand. People wonder, it's like, should I start with analog first and pen and paper and then digital? My recommendation is do both right now, okay? Because you're going to use it eventually anyways. So why not experience doing this currently, okay, getting used to the hardware, getting used to the pressure, getting used to the smoothness of the surface, but also with pen and paper. And that way, you're getting introduced to both worlds, and when you get ready to fully migrate to one or the other, you'll have the necessary tools already under your belt. Obviously, you'll still work with it to get to the professional needs, but there shouldn't be this one then the other kind of thing. Integrate it seamlessly into it. Now, if there are instructors out there that tell you otherwise, that say, don't do this, don't do that, in my personal opinion, try it anyways, okay? It's best to always not go against all your instructors, but to question it and find out your own answer from there. Dialogue and conversation from it. Well, why would you suggest that? And I tried this, but I want to listen to what your answer is, right? Dialogue is important. And if the instructor's not open to have a conversation, to express an opinion, you got to find a different source. And so for me, it's like all my methods and techniques are there for people to actually try and attempt, but I want them to experiment. I want them to try other things. What did you discover? What did you find? Show me what you think of, right? And from that dialogue, I can then learn something as well too. There we go, bear headdress. It's a bit, morbid, I guess, but my brain spills weird ideas at me sometimes. But it all is derived, again, like I said, from the things I've seen, experienced, watched, and I love this stuff. Cool. The next conversation talks that I'll probably be having, and also for people like Amber, we'll be doing a lot of live streams in the future. I'm probably going to pick up on my Twitch stream again soon, probably next year. Currently for the break and also how things have been going, it's been kind of crazy and busy and hectic, I'm sure a lot of you guys know. But you guys will hopefully catch us in the future real soon for things like our own stream of Twitch. You can also follow me on Instagram, of course, on Peter Han Style. And from there, if you guys have any further questions or even classes you want to take, I offer sessions of classes 4 times a year, and each session runs about 8 weeks. This particular method of dynamic sketching is one of the classes that I offer. I also offer a design class and a figure drawing class. So that will begin next year, probably end of January. I'll be offering registration. If you follow my social media, that information will be posted up there. Other than that, that's going to be the best way for you guys to interact with me in the future and to get more resources and information of education as you have maybe experienced a little bit today. So if there's no other questions, we're going to be wrapping up here real soon.
Last question.
Yeah.
Your Twitch stream, is it also Peter Han Style?
Yes, it is. If you just go to Twitch, Peter Han Style, search for that, you'll find that channel, subscribe to it. And if you subscribe, you'll find also a backlog of archives, of videos, of live streams, and each of them run about 2 hours in length. And again, if anybody has any other questions, you can reach out as best you can through email, and I'll try to reply if possible. If not, the best thing you can also do is just visit my live streams and ask questions there, okay? So there's your Viking guy with a bear headdress. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining. I appreciate your time and interest and efforts. Enjoy the rest of the year. Have a good holidays and Christmas and New Year's. And thank you guys also here for joining in. And if you're local, like I said, come participate, hang out at the Wacom Experience Center. And thank you also the people and the staff that are here as well, too. And this stream, I believe, should be watchable again in the future. So check it out if you missed a big part of it. Thank you, guys.